Howdy hey, I am Randall K. coming to you live from magnificent Middle Tennessee with another installment of Weekends in the Word for this fine, I was going to say Shabbat, but that officially ended at sundown. So anyway, so this first day of the week, even though it's Saturday night, but you folks familiar with the traditional Jewish time reckoning realize that this is the day begins at sundown. So one day begins, the other day starts. One day ends, the other begins. You know what I meant. Anyway, continuing through this book as an outline, Yeshua, the life of Messiah from a Messianic Jewish perspective. This is the abridged edition. The book and books, whether it be abridged or not, by Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum. And if you're interested in learning more about that, there we go. You can head on over to BibleNewsRadio.com, check out the recommended resources page. Scroll through there. They are in alphabetical order, and you'll find near the bottom there this tile showing a portion of the black cover book. Click on that, take you to the page, read a little more. Details button will take you to the RL store, the store of RL Ministries, where you can purchase the book. And before you check out, be sure to plug in the coupon code Bible News. That will save you 20%, not just on this book, but anything you find in the RL Ministry stores, be it an item for less than $3 or an item over $100. Anyway, everything they have there is really good stuff. I can't recommend it enough, and that's why we have many of their resources on our recommended resources page. Not a coincidence. All right, so we're going to continue in John chapter 11. Last weekend I left you hanging before the resurrection of Lazarus, if you will, anglicized name, the anglicized version of his name. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. John chapter 11, beginning at verse 38. And let me make sure I've got this queued up where you can see it. Melanie's with us, and I am, and there's some other viewers whom I don't know, who I can't see, but welcome to the broadcast. And I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody else in any other channels. All right. So let's check it out, shall we? And let's do this prayerfully. After all, the Bible is the only book that comes with its author, and let us approach him for understanding of what he has prepared for us. Father God, you are the King of the universe, worthy of every blessing, honor, glory, power, and praise. Our God, we are thankful for these words that you have preserved for us throughout the ages, especially these Gospels, the good news that tell us of the ministry of Yeshua, the long promised and long awaited Messiah. We pray that you would give us understanding, Lord, ears to hear those things that your Spirit is saying. To your people, we offer ourselves and this time to use, for you to use as you will, according to your good pleasure, for our good and your glory. We ask these things in the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. All right, so if you're even familiar with John chapter 11, if you remember last time, we dealt with this situation of where Lazarus was sick. His sisters, Miriam and Martha, sent word to him, sent a delegation saying, hey, Lazar is sick, And when Yeshua heard that he was sick, he stayed in the place where he was 2 more days, uh, purposefully to make sure that Lazarus would be dead when he arrived. And indeed, he had been dead 4 days upon arrival. And both Miriam and Marta basically scolded Yeshua, saying, if you had been here, it's like your duty to be here. Our brother would not have died. And for those of you who may follow the Daily Disciples page on Facebook, and the group there, rather, it's a group. Anyway, I put a little bit of posted page. It tells a little about the imperfect verb, the imperfect Greek verb tense, as well as the middle voice in the was it? I don't remember. it was yeah, imperfect middle. I don't recall. Anyway, see, I'm no Greek scholar. I'm wouldn't even call myself a Greek student, really, other than once in a while when I don't understand something, I go and look it up, and I know that Greek verbs are made, they have tense, mood, and voice, but I'm not familiar with all of the tenses, the moods, nor the voices, but they're pretty exacting, especially Koine Greek, the common Greek that was common, hence the name Koine, in the first century in the Mediterranean world. Very, very precise language, and much like English has suffered over the years, the Greek language has suffered over the years and has become more imprecise. In fact, words, consonants are even pronounced differently than they were in Koine or Classical Greek. But be that as it may, that's for free. Let's go ahead and get into the text. Yochanan, John, chapter 11, verse 38, we read, Jesus, I'm going to say Yeshua, therefore, again, groaning in himself, coming to the grave, we're using the King James, today, just because we can. He, groaning in himself, comes to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. Pretty typical form of burial in the first century. Basically, because they were family plots. Family would have a cave, and that goes all the way back, especially Jewish tradition. Remember going all the way back to Abraham in Genesis when he purchased the cave at the end of the field, for the burial of Sarah, his wife, and then eventually he went in it. His sons, his son Yitzhak and Ishmael buried him there or put him in the cave. So it goes way back, that tradition, all the way back to Abraham, the father of the Jews. Burial in a cave. In some cases, in the case of, like we see later in the New Testament with Josephus, or Yosef, really, that, he had a tomb of his own that was, no one person laid in. He was kind of wealthy, being the Sanhedrin, but often even a not so wealthy family would have a cave where they put all of their relatives, and through the generations as they passed. And anyway, so a cave with a stone over it, pretty common for Jews in the first century for the burial. Got to get the air quotes, both fingers in the little box there. Interment, I guess, of the deceased. Even though it's still not in the ground, it's not interment, it's encavement. I don't know. uh, what the Latin would be anyway. So, so the grave was a cave, stone lay upon it. Pretty common. Yeshua said, "Take ye away the stone." Martha, the sister of him that was dead, said unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. Now the 4 days is significant, and we saw it earlier in the chapter when it said when Yeshua had come to Bethany, and we find that even he was still on the outskirts, not even in the town proper. Hey, Sylvia, welcome to the broadcast. Said even then he'd been dead 4 days. And that is significant because there is this Jewish tradition. I don't know how far it goes back. We find it in the Talmud. We find it in the Talmud Berachot. This practice called Shemira, and Shemira comes from the verb which means to watch. I'm trying to think of the psalm. Is it 127? I don't know. I'm thinking the Hebrew. I'm trying to think of the English. Behold, he who watches over Israel never sleeps nor slumbers. That verse. I'm trying to remember where that is in the Psalms, but in the Hebrew, it's Hineyolum velo Hineyolum velo Yishan velo Yishan Shomer Yisrael. There's a song that goes with it from Galilee of the Nations music, but Hineyolunum Hine lo yanum. Hine, behold, not sleeps. Velo Yashan, neither slumbers. Shomer Yisrael, the one who watches Yisrael. So, Shemirah is the practice of watching or guarding over body, and I believe it's still done today, where a person is supposed to watch, person or persons, supposed to watch over a corpse for 3 days after death. You're supposed to wait 3 days before burial, before final, sealing off the tomb. They can watch inside the tomb. Sometimes I think in modern days it's done inside of a room that's been set aside for Shemira, for the watching of the body, or guarding the body. And the tradition is that the soul hovers around the body for 3 days, and that they could resuscitate, and so come the 4th day, the body is really starting to decompose, not so good, and so by the 4th day, they're considered dead. Within that first 3 days, they could come back. So why watch over the body? Well, the important part of watching the body is to keep the rodents away. Going back to Genesis chapter 9, verse 2, the idea that the Lord said to Noah that I shall put the fear of, or the dread of man, the fear of man in the animals, basically. And so the fear of man is in other living creatures, and that's so fear of creatures, animals aren't afraid of dead men, but of living men. So so all that to say that someone or someone's watch over a body for 3 days. For what it's called, for what it's worth, as just talking about from the Psalms, the rodents would keep me away. Yeah, so you wouldn't make a very good shomeret. A male who watches over bodies is shomer, like just covered in the Psalm, shomer Yisrael, he who watches over Yisrael. course, watching over a body is the shomer, and then a female who watches, a woman who watches over bodies is a shomeret. So all that for free, a little Hebrew lesson. But Shemirah is the tradition of watching over, guarding the body, keeping it safe from vermin in case the spirit of the person wants to re-enter the body. But come, by the fourth day, it's okay. This this body is no longer fit for habitation. It's starting to decompose, and so that's just tradition. You can look back in the Talmud. I think Talmud Berachot, chapter 18, talks about the different practices of Shemirah and whether one or not one is exempt from reciting the Shema while they're acting as a shomer or a shomeret. In fact, I wanted to bring out one verse because it brings about the whole, and the Talmud is this legal interpretation of the law, and then the interpretation of the interpretation ad nauseum. That well, this rabbi said this rabbi said this, and what about that, and so, let me see if I can get the text down here. Okay, here in the William Davidson translation, the Talmud, we have Berachot 18a here. The Gemara asks, what is the practical difference between these two opinions? And these two opinions is, well, let's bring it here. The Gemara discusses the master of the Baraita itself. If it was taught in the Baraita where one who watches over the deceased, shomer or shomeret, even though it is not his dead relative, is exempt from the recitation of the Shema. And the Shema, of course, there is from Deuteronomy chapter 6, that passage that... Have I read the Talmud? Not in entirety, no, just when it's referenced from other sources. I've read a lot. It's like reading, legal opinions on things, and anyway. So the Shema is that portion from Deuteronomy chapter 6, Shema Yisrael, begins, Hear, O Yisrael, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and one is Echad there. That's important, but we're not going to get into the Shema. But it's a mitzvot, it's a command in Jewish tradition that's important, that one recites the Shema on a daily basis. Anyway, so one who watches over the deceased, even though it is not his dead relative, is exempt from the recitation of Shema, from the Amidah prayer, and from phylacteries, and from all mitzvot mentioned in the Torah. The Baraita continues, if two individuals were watching over the deceased, this one watches and that one recites Shema, and then that one watches and this one recites Shema. Ben Azai says, if they were traveling with the deceased on a boat, they are permitted to set the deceased down in this corner of the boat and both pray in another corner of the boat. Well, the Gemara asks, what's the practical difference between these two opinions? Well, Ravina said the practical difference between them is whether or not one need be concerned about mice inside the boat. The first sage holds that we are concerned about mice everywhere, and is therefore inappropriate to leave the deceased unguarded, even on a boat, lest he be eaten by mice. The other sage, Ben Azai, maintains that we are not concerned about mice on a boat. And well, yeah. Here they talk about mitzvot and Torah, but reciting the Shema is not, while it is in the Torah, It's not a command to recite it ritualistically on a daily basis, but it became a command. They consider a mitzvot, the commands, set of commands. They talk about mitzvot in Torah, even though it really isn't. And then we have these opinions about making all these rules about whether, you're exempt while you're watching a body. If it's a close relative, then you should be. And it's kind of what happens in courtrooms today. They kind of take the law and then interpret it based on circumstances and try to, adjudicate based on extenuating circumstances. Only in the case of rabbinic Judaism that becomes written part, became part of the law itself. In even these differences of opinions and Rabbi so-and-so said that Rabbi so-and-so said that Rabbi so-and-so said. Even by the time of Yeshua, that, he comes talking, he doesn't cite anything in Talmud or cite this right or that. He just is, this is the way it is. And so he taught as one having authority, and everyone was kind of blown away. Anyway, I'm going way off track. I'm rambling here now. Let's get back to our text in Yochanan, John chapter 11. All right. Verse 39, 2 verses in. Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. And dead, of course, there in italics, because there's no underlying word in the Greek. It's put there for clarification, but the strong implication, he's been 4 days. He's been 4 days here in the tomb. So he's, we sealed this up for a reason. At the end of day 3, spirit's not coming back. This body's starting to decompose. And now 4 days have gone by, the end of the 4th day. And it's like, Lord, by this time he stinketh. Probably not a good idea to roll away that stone until there's nothing but bones left. We want to wait till all the flesh is rotted off. Anyway, Yeshua says unto her, said I not unto thee that if thou wouldst believe, thou wouldst see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Yeshua lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I know that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I said, or I spoke, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. And when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. I would have liked to hear that. I heard a sermon once that it's a good thing he said Lazarus, because the Lord commanded just come forth. A bunch of people would have been resurrected and come out. So called him by name. Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound head and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Yeshua said unto him, Loose him and let him go. So, I want to take a little bit of a break here. I didn't have the Greek text queued up for you here. I want to look at verse 44. Hold on. Lisa Maria Darrell has joined us, and Fatima somebody is with us, and Berlin has joined us. Glad to have you here. Grave clothes. What are grave clothes? You're thinking, what does one wear to death? Here in the Western world, they often, dress people up in their Sunday best when they put them in a casket. But grave clothes. Kyrios with linen strips. So typical mummy, like an Egyptian mummy, linen strips, strips of linen wrapped all about. So that's grave clothes. And fascinating enough, and I don't know why the King James translators chose to do it that way, translate linen strips as grave clothes, but also um, stand by. Going back to Luke chapter 2. Hang with me. We go to interlinear. Boy, I can't speak tonight. Um, all right. Well, it's not what I thought. So, never mind. Detour there. But linen strips. I was thinking that the same Greek word might be used, speaking of Yeshua in swaddling clothes at his birth. But it's not particular speaking to the material or its construction, whether it's strips, but just that he was swaddled in cloth. So um, it could have been grave clothes, seen as anyway. It was probably a grotto, and there may have been uh, grave clothes, linen strips there, but anyway, that's speculation from the text anyway. And I thought we were going to find something there, but we didn't, because it really doesn't talk about, again, the make or the form of the cloths. Just that he was swaddled in cloths is what we find there. All right, so back to John chapter 11. So came forth, Lazarus come forth, and he was bound hand and foot with these linen strips. How much? Whoops, I missed that comment. How much reverb you using? Oh, way too much. Is there some kind of echo or something? Check 1 2. Not hearing anything there. Make sure there's no kind of feedback loop here that would be happening. Nope. Shouldn't be any reverb. There you go. Just trying to throw me off there. That's all right. Harmless fun, I guess. So he's bound hand and foot with these grave clothes. He's wrapped up like a mummy, because he was just moments ago, and his face was bound with a napkin. So the separate the body, like neck down to the feet, these linen strips, and then a piece of cloth over the face, and we see that at the resurrection of Yeshua, only only he didn't come out bound hand and foot with the linen strips. Those stayed in place undisturbed, like he went through them or something. But then the face covering, the napkin, that was folded up in a place by itself. So, and various people read various things into that, but that just is the custom of burial at that time, to wrap the body except for the head in the linen strips, and cover the face with a whole piece of cloth, or wrap the head with a full piece of cloth. So, and that's one of the things that people say, well, the Shroud of Turin isn't that, because that, anyway, there wouldn't be a whole sheet over the whole body. It'd be wrapped in linen and just the face covered with a whole piece of cloth, not the whole body with a piece of cloth. But that's something entirely different. So you can see, Lazarus coming out here. He's wrapped up like a mummy, because he was one. Just kind of, bouncing out like a pogo stick coming out of there, hopping around. And yeah, loose him. And yeah, I suppose, what a trip. The locals knew this guy would be dead. In fact, we read that, when Miriam went out to the tomb, they all followed her, the professional wailers and all that kind of stuff. So, there were people that were there at the time he died. I'm sure, soon after his death, they would have seen him buried, and now they're seeing him come out, and they're commanded, loose him and let him go. We don't read that he was loose and let go, but we do see him later, so he must have been loose and let go. We see Lazarus, later on. And so I'm just thinking about that dynamic. If you had seen somebody, you were there for their burial and their interment, their encavement, and a corpse went in, and then after 4 days later, he's coming out, hopping out, all wrapped up. It's like, okay, that's kind of creepy. And then you're told to loose him, let him go. I mean, would you be if the Lord said so, I'm sure you'd move, but I don't know, it'd be weird. It's like, I'd be afraid to touch him, It's like, okay, this is, we're in the supernatural here, because this guy was dead, and now he's popping out of here like a pogo stick, and you want me to loose him and go over and touch that? I don't know. I'd be afraid of getting, irradiated or something. I don't know, But, and then so, going back to the text here, the plot to kill Yeshua. The section is labeled. Yeah, same. Yeah, definitely. Then when many of the Jews which came to Miriam or Mary had seen the things which Yeshua did, believed on him. So the Jews which came to Mary, these would have been relatives or even, professional mourners that came along, because that was the thing to do. You come and, while the body is being watched by the shomer and or shomeret, there's, you just wail and weep, and be with the family. And so they came to her, to lament with her. So they had been there. And I like that John points this out, that many of the Jews which came to Mary, so the ones that had been there this whole time, and had seen the things which Yeshua did, that is, call out to the Father and say, Lazarus, come forth, believed on him. Well, he just, raised the dead, and where he'd done that before in his ministry, this was someone who'd been dead 4 days. And so this was beyond the possibility of resuscitation in their tradition, in Jewish tradition. And so it's like, okay, this has to be Messiah. But some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Yeshua had done. Of course, these religious leaders, do you know what's going on here? You know what this Yeshua has done now? He's a friend too, right? Anyway. So, better go tell them. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council, and said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles, And if we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation. There we go. This is key. This to me is the giveaway of everything that happened. You know, um, the rejection of the religious leaders from the start, and their rejection and opposition to Yeshua. I mean, even though he proved time after time again by his words and his deeds that he was the promised Messiah. The promises for hundreds of years, through hundreds of prophecies, he fulfilled them. There should have been no doubt whatsoever this is the promised Messiah. But they kept opposing him at every turn. It's like, why, of all people, those who were professionals in the law, in the law and the prophets, they should have known better than anybody else, that the time of their visitation had come, that Messiah had come. But they kept opposing him down to the ridiculous. He casts out demons by the prince of demons. You got to be wondering, what possesses someone to, when their Messiah comes, the Jewish Messiah comes, the promised Messiah comes, right there, right then, undeniable, undoubtedly arrives, you reject him. What are they thinking? I think it's right here. If we let this man thus alone, all men believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation. See, if you're a student of the ancient Roman Empire, which I'm not really, but prior to this time and up until AD 70, when Jerusalem was, it was before that, because there was the siege before that before Jerusalem was, after years of siege, was leveled and burned. But prior to this, around the time of Yeshua, some AD 30 some, in the vast Roman Empire that occupied the Mediterranean world, Rome ruled with an iron fist. However, where there were pockets or islands of pretty well organized government, they were a little more hands off. I mean, they were there. Roman presence was definitely there. We had the Praetorium. That the prefect Pontius Pilate was there in Jerusalem. They had barracks for the guards, and the Roman soldiers roamed the streets, just in case stuff got out of hand. But pretty much when it came to civil law, most civil law, the Jews were allowed to govern their own affairs. The Sanhedrin, the ruling Jews were allowed to take care of most civil matters. Civil and criminal matters, if you will, if you were going to divide it into modern, Western kind of court cases, criminal cases, civil cases. They were allowed to deal with a lot of those, pretty much all civil and some criminal. And so they had this favor with the Roman government. The ruling Jews were somewhat autonomous. They did not have the right of capital punishment. So in cases, some, serious crimes, they did not. It was Rome who adjudicated those. And the Jews had just recently, within a matter of years to this time, had lost the right to capital punishment. And so that makes the timing of Messiah all that important, because the death, Psalm 22, Zechariah 12:10, Messiah being pierced and all this, that, and, being Psalm 22 pretty much describes the crucifixion, all that. All these prophecies regarding death of Messiah are important because hey, thanks for the super heart, Melanie. If Yeshua had been, for blasphemy, had been executed according to the Torah, he would have been stoned to death. But all these prophecies concerning Messiah talk about him being pierced and what sounds a lot like crucifixion. And so, so the timing is perfect that Messiah would die this way because the Jews had lost the right to carry out capital punishment. So, and if you read the annals of Tacitus, a Roman historian Tacitus, pretty sure it's Tacitus, it's not Suetonius, I'm pretty sure it's Tacitus, we learn a little about Pontius Pilate, which we're going to look at when we get up to the crucifixion, look at more detail. But suffice it to say, there were a few times where, because of this sort of hands-off, the Jews having somewhat autonomy, and then Pilate not really understanding that, finessing that, there were a couple of times that things got out of hand, and we read about the apostles mentioned Yeshua about the blood of those that Pilate mingled, with the sacrifice. We'll get into the details of that. And there was another case regarding putting up shields in the temple complex that caused a riot, and so because of this, several incidents of unrest with the Jews' autonomy and Pilate not handling their limited autonomy so well, things were kind of on thin ice with Rome. Pilate was definitely skating on thin ice, and the Jews still were holding on to their position with a little bit of, favor. And so if we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him. Well, now here comes King of the Jews, and boy, now things can go bad for us. The Romans shall come and take both away our place and our nation. Our place, I don't think they're referring to, peace to you, brother. I don't think they're referring to our place as a whole. I think it's our place as the leaders, as these leaders, as the ruling class, as the Sanhedrin, that are still able to have position. We have leadership position. We have respect, and we saw that earlier about, Yeshua said, unless your righteousness surpass that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall not be saved. And like, well, who then can be saved? Everybody like, ooh, the Pharisees are all that in a bag of chips. They're so holy, they're so religious, and they had this place of respect and honor and power, and they were quite enjoying that. The Sanhedrin, the ruling Jews, were enjoying this place of power. And so if Yeshua starts drawing people after him after a few incidents of Rome watching things a little more closely, things getting a little out of hand with the Jews and Pilate's ruling over the Jews, ticking them off, and it's wouldn't call it a powder keg, but it was a little unsettled, and the emperor and the Roman government were a little unsettled. Kind of everybody was on notice, both the Jews and the Roman prefect, Pontius Pilate, who they installed. It's like, you're on notice, we're watching you. Keep things cool. You've got this favor for now, but watch it. So if Yeshua comes and all, believe on him, start following him, that's it. We're done. The Romans shall come and take away both our place. We won't be rulers anymore. and nation. There'll be not a nation to rule over anymore. It won't be Israel anymore. It'll be just another Roman province, and the Romans will lose their identity. In fact, after Jerusalem was leveled in AD 70, and about 1 million Jews killed by um, uh, you know estimates of ancient historians, and then big disbursement, all that. After that, the Romans went and named that province, which they'd previously called Judea because of the Jews. They called it Palestine, this Roman province, to erase the knowledge of the Jews, to erase their heritage, their memory, basically. Completely renamed it, taking anything Jewish out of it. And Palestine named for other, the Gentile nations there, like the Philistines, and it was an insult to the Jews after when the Roman government finally got fed up in 80, 60 some, there were the revolts and stuff. Anyway, when they finally said, "That's it, you're done. We're getting rid of the Jews. We're getting rid of Israel. It's another Roman province." They called it Palestine. Oh my goodness, 8:25. And we'll go ahead and read through verse 53. I'm doing well, thank you. Um, I'll try not to commentate so much, but and one of them named Caiaphas, being the high priest the same year, and we'll notice at the time of Yeshua's trial, there's Ananias and Caiaphas, and they were both high priests, and how could it be? One was the people's high priest, the other one was appointed by the Roman government. Again, they let the Jews have their kind of autonomy, and when something happened they weren't too cool about, they said, "This is getting out of hand." Romans brought the iron fist down, brought the hammer down, and did what they want. And so there were two high priests that we'll see later on, and one as far as the people still recognized as the high priest, but then there was the Roman appointed high priest. Anyway, one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest the same year, said unto them, "Know you nothing?" I don't have the. Sorry, didn't have the text up for you. Know ye nothing at all, or ye know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yeshua should die for the nation, and not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of God that were scattered abroad, so Jews and Gentiles. And from that day forth they took counsel together for to put him to death. And the other who was the other thing? The other high priest, Ananias, or Ananias, if you will. Ananias and Caiaphas. I'm trying to remember which one. I think it was Caiaphas that was appointed by the Roman government. But I'll have to go back and read my Roman histories. That might be Suetonius and not, or Josephus may have brought that out. I don't know. But you're welcome, between Suetonius and Tacitus, the Roman historians, and Josephus, the Jewish historian, we get a really good picture of what was going on at this time in history in and around Jerusalem. It's really fascinating stuff where you go, wow, this is totally orchestrated of God. The timing for Messiah couldn't have been any other time in history but then. But it's going on 8:30. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Tomorrow evening, Lord willing, around the same time. It was a little bit late tonight because I was pulling a tick off of me or out of me. They seem to like me. One of the hazards of living in the southeast in the warmer months is I I don't know. I seem to pick up ticks, but not not like that. But the little red insects that burrow their little pinchers, their heads into you and want to suck your blood, I guess. Anyway, all right. So tomorrow evening, round about 7:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time, I'll be back with Weekends in the Word, and and move on through the harmony of the Gospels and through Yeshua, life of Messiah from a Messianic Jewish perspective. So the Lord bless you, the Lord keep you, make his face to shine upon you, be gracious unto you, lift his countenance upon you, give you peace, and yeah, and Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow night. Good night. God bless.